Welcome to Digital Currents, brought to you by Morgan Creek Digital. I'm Xavier Segura. Each episode, we spotlight the topics and people changing the tech industry with a focus on AI, blockchain, chips, and big data. Thanks for listening, and please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
Mark, happy Friday. As we just said, we've done it again. We're wearing all of your navy. It looks black on camera.
Yeah, I mean, it's super dark navy, but it definitely looks black. And I swear, we actually do not plan this. It is, we are just brothers from other mothers, I guess. You know,
I think, Mark, you captured in at least the spirit of the dark hooded sweatshirt, because today,
yes,
of all days, I mean, there's so many things to talk about, but probably the leading story, unless you want to do the sock game reveal first.
Well, no, it's all related because it is Bitcoin Friday. So, you know, we got the orange pants, and I've got the origin story, the Genesis block, you know, Chancellor on the brink of the second bailout. So to me, I did that in honor of, this is a big day.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, the Genesis block was the biggest day, but today is a big day. I mean, the announcement of a strategic Bitcoin. Now, there's still details to be worked out, and it's not like they're going to suddenly buy a bunch, which is why the price went down. But it's a big deal for, you know, one of those powerful governments, maybe the most powerful government, to acknowledge that Bitcoin and only Bitcoin is basically the equivalent of gold. I mean, that's a pretty cool thing.
No, and well said. I mean, as we were live, Mark, during yesterday's webinar, kind of a little bit of those tea leaves started revealing themselves with Texas, one of the most, let's call them the most fervent states in our union, to kind of go
all another country.
Yeah, exactly. It's got its own flag. I'm surprised. Maybe there's naming rights for its own Gulf now, the Gulf of Texas. I can see that in the ballot in the coming years. But really, what we joke to say that there was some campaign promises around the potential of a state-led reserve. And then I'm sure that you saw, Mark, in the weeks after the inauguration day, once we got some more direction from the White House that a strategic reserve may include other assets in the digital space aside from BTC, Texas also amended their own orders to reflect that, although the real story here, Mark, is Bitcoin, because that is the rising tide that lifts all boats. And you were exactly right. When we saw kind of this now, it's so funny because so oftentimes Bitcoin was always thought of as the kind of the yin to the public markets yang. And really, in this couple of weeks, I'll argue that it really hasn't done that. It's kind of mirrored very closely when there are some challenges to tariffs. Then it will also kind of retreat in some of the optimism, because fundamentally, Mark, the holders, the real price action movers of Bitcoin is now BlackRock and BlackRock Elk. So this creates a little bit of a new effect. And, you know, we love basketball. We love all things sports in this show. But, you know, there's an old saying in basketball that Charles Barkley always used to say, you live by the three, you die by the three.
Die by the three, yeah.
And so in crypto, we're kind of seeing that on the institutional side and the macro impacts.
Yeah, look, I mean, be careful what you ask for. You might get it.
Right.
It is definitely applicable here. What happens is in these periods where there was a financialization. So if you think about it, why is it 0.15 correlated to stocks and 0.0 correlated to bonds? It's supposed to be this great macro asset. Well, it's because the people that own it, the hodlers, right, the hardcore Bitcoin aficionados, they don't buy it and sell it based on what's going on in the macro world or what's happening with stocks or bonds or interest rates. The problem is it's the incremental buyer and seller that determine the daily price. The value is determined by the hodlers, right? The people that just keep accumulating over time. And that's why we keep making this series of higher highs and higher lows. But the incremental price is determined by the people on the margin. And unfortunately, those people on the margin, not only did they become more financialized or more institutionalized with the introduction of the ETFs last year, but then you've got another couple things where the futures markets became very large, and I'll explain why that matters in a second. But then the other problem is leverage. And so if you look at what happened over the last 3 weeks, right, we lost $2.5 trillion with a T dollars of value in the public stock markets. That's more than Germany, Japan, Spain, and the UK put together, right? And that was just in a matter of weeks on this tariff and trade warfare. And to put that in perspective, why did that happen? Well, it happened because, one, valuations were super high and they were primed for a Mag 7 decline. Now it's become the magnificent, instead of the Mag 7, it's the magnificent declines. They're all down, big double digits. Tesla's down like 50%. So, but the reason is leverage. Margin debt was the highest it had ever been. So when you buy an asset and then you buy it on leverage and it goes up, life is good. You're making extra returns. When the prices go down and you get the margin call, well, if you're already all in, right? So not only were portfolio managers all in, they were all in plus leverage, right? 103% invested broadly. So they have nothing to sell, and you can't sell the thing that just went down. So what do? You sell Bitcoin because it's liquid. And so as the hedge funds started to come into Bitcoin, they created this higher correlation in downturns, not necessarily in the up markets, because we've seen Bitcoin go up and NASDAQ go flat, and we've seen both go up together. But in downdrafts, all correlations go to one, and that's true of all assets. But your point on BlackRock and IBID, this is the real problem, right? That thing became monstrous, right? $50 billion. Well, that's not all long, right? Their whole Millennium owns $2 billion of IBIT, right? And they're short at least $2 billion, maybe more, because they may even be net short futures. And so what we saw last week leading up to when we were recording on triple witching, and we're wearing black today in honor, I guess, of that, is the problem is, as that future rolls down to the expiration date, the arbitrage goes from 11, 12, 13% down to 4 or 5%, even, below the cost of funding. And so it had to be this unwind. And so you had, quote unquote, record outflows from the ETF. No, yes, there were outflows, but it wasn't people that just changed their mind. It was hedge funds unwinding this arbitrage trade. But the problem is, if there's no incremental buyer to take up that sudden increase in selling, price goes down. So price went down a lot. Now then Uncle Larry bailed us out, right? Uncle Larry's good for something. He said, we're going to put 2% or 1 to 2%, 1.5% in all the ETFs that are multi-strategy, and we'll buy our own, not anyone else's, but that's good. And so the price rebounded. And then we had the announcement on Sunday that, Trump said, there's going to be a strategic reserve. But he listed Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, XRP, and Cardano. I mean, WTF on those last ones. So leading up until last night, there was some concern that the announcement today's the big, crypto, what are they calling it? Crypto confab in
the crypto summit, right?
Summit. And there's a bunch, of really, really, really smart, talented, wealthy people who are convening in DC to talk about crypto. And
yep.
And
we actually have a confirmed list, Mark. We've got a confirmed list. Are you ready for this?
Yeah.
For the industry leaders, Chris Dixon, Fred Thiel, Garlinghouse, of course, our old buddy Giancarlo. Okay. You've got the Winklevoss twins. They do not like to be called Winklevoss.
I know. They don't like the
twins.
Winklevoss.
I make that mistake from time to time. I will unwind that. Sorry, guys. Brian Armstrong, of course. The head of Chainlink, Samani, of course. David Bailey, of course, the CEO of Bitcoin Magazine. Jonathan Steinberg, CEO of WisdomTree. Brian Brooks, Shane Copeland. And then there are a couple of, unconfirmed. I love this, Mark. You're going to like this list even more. This is the unconfirmed industry leaders, okay? So we've got Anatoly, right, who is the founder of Solana, unconfirmed. Hodgkinson again, founder of Cardano, unconfirmed. CZ, Mark, back from exile, unconfirmed. Back from exile.
I mean, that's huge. I mean, think about that. Think about the guy who was put in jail for violating laws that he didn't violate because there were no laws. But he actually said, "I'll do my 4 months," and now he's being invited to the White House,
right, with open arms, and a welcome basket.
And here's where it gets really weird. So CZ is the guy who outed SBF as a total fraud.
Yeah, right? Without him, it wouldn't have gone down that way. Yeah,
total fraud, and unwound all the stuff, and we found all the links to Democratic fundraising and all this stuff, all kind of bad stuff, and Ukraine and all kind of, so then Sam goes to jail. But here's the thing. His mom and dad have been lobbying Trump to get him pardoned. So all this is it. We're having this meeting's going on as we're sitting here recording this, and it's awesome. But what they clarified is there is a difference between a strategic Bitcoin reserve and a digital asset stockpile. Now, the digital asset stockpile is the stuff they've already seized. And there are 7 assets, including Ethereum, Solana, and XRP and Hedera and a little bit of Cardano. And they seized that from the drug stuff and the illicit actors. So they said, all right, we're not going to sell that. Now, what the people below Bitcoin, right, in that next tier down, we're hoping, well, not only don't sell, but include our coins in the reserve. No, the strategic Bitcoin reserve is a reserve just for Bitcoin. But the disappointing thing, and why the price went down overnight and it's rebounded a little bit, but the disappointment was the fine print said, we won't sell any that we already have. And, everyone's been tweeting about the huge mistake. They sold 236,000 Bitcoin over the course of, last 5 or 6 years.
I'm glad you clarified that, Mark, because that was one thing that was somewhat confused about that I think folks could appreciate your perspective on. So this was what Mark is referring to, guys, is what David Sachs, the crypto czar, said. And I'm sure you saw this video, Mark. I don't want to, cast too much dispersion here, but as President Trump is signing this, he said, this is what you want, right? This is going to be good. So almost like reaffirming, he's not 100% sure what he's signing, but he thinks it's going to be good.
The Trumpster is definitely not a Bitcoiner. He's definitely not a crypto kid. Look, he was told before, the election process started back in April or May, hey, there are a bunch of people who are single issue voters. Go to Nashville and rile them up and they will vote for you. Mm-hmm. He's like, sounds like a good plan. I like voters. So he did. And I've told this story before. I loved the video of him when he does, on day one, I will fire Gary Gensler. And the crowd goes so crazy.
It was nuts.
His face was true astonishment. He was like, oh my God, I'm going to say that again. And he said it again and the crowd went crazy. And so he made a bunch of promises that he probably didn't even know what he was promising because someone told him, read this script. And now he's had to follow through, and he did. He freed Ross. I mean, glory, hallelujah, that's amazing. That guy never should have spent that much time in jail in the first place. I mean, community service, maybe, whatever, but he paid his dues.
Yeah, but they'll take his Bitcoin, but they'll also take his freedom.
Yeah.
So your point, Mark, about what they lost, this was the quote from David Sachs that said, premature sales of Bitcoin have already cost U.S. taxpayers over $17 billion in lost value. Now the federal government will have a strategy to maximize the value of its holdings, but that plan is to have a plan. which is why the market.
Plan is to have a plan. And it didn't say, and then it went further, it said only budget neutral acquisitions, meaning we could sell some gold, but there's a whole bunch of people that don't like that idea. So they're like, well, maybe we revalue the gold because they're holding the gold at like 1971 prices. Maybe we revalue the gold and we take some of that, but that isn't a cash thing. So they actually would have to sell some bars to get some money. There was some other thing they thought they could sell that was in the reserve, but we're definitely not at the point of they're going to go out and buy 200,000 Bitcoin this year.
Yeah. And that's what everybody wanted, right? And I think that's why the market reacted. It wasn't a big move. It wasn't that huge record candle that we saw last week, but it was a market reaction from 90 down to about 85. So I'm putting my son to sleep and I get the notification on my phone. I say, whoa, something must have just happened. And then, of course, that coincides with the announcement. And so folks were a little bit disappointed here. But I think one of the things that we even discussed internally on our webinar and in an external format was, where are the funds going to come from in a budget deficit world that we live in when kind of the number one promise is to reduce the national debt? Now we can think about, diverting, one side of the ledger to the other. Could you get very creative with things like federal interest rates and treasury notes and tacking those up and potentially increasing that yield? Yes, but I think it's one of those things. I don't think they do that for Bitcoin. Maybe for other things, but it's going to be one of those wait and see type of moments. I'm surprised that it happened early enough. So I must question in my, maybe Mark, we've been doing the show a long time. Some of your tendencies are rubbing off on me. And I'll say that I'm wondering if there's some sort of misdirection here. I'm going to wait till Sunday to see if there's something else that's coming. That usually is when some of these later announcements come.
100%. I mean, look, we all know the biggest trick in the book is when you want to buy a lot of something, you don't tell everyone you love it. You tell everyone you don't like it, and you actually may even short a little bit because you want to buy at a lower price, not a higher price. So I agree with you. I think there's a little bit of posturing going on here saying, oh, well, we're not sure about this. And then bam, when the markets are closed, they're going to say, you know what, we changed our mind. And we're going to sell some gold. We went to Fort Knox. We did the audit. It's actually there, hopefully. And we're going to sell a few bars. Or, like you say, we're going to monetize something else. They could sell a piece of the Alaskan Wildlife Refuge to, somebody. And I mean, there's lots of things, a lot of assets that the U.S. has that they could monetize and convert into a better asset, right? All the assets we hold that are denominated in dollars are being devalued, right? Because we keep printing more dollars. If you converted some, doesn't have to be all, but some into this deflationary asset, Bitcoin, then that would be better than all the inflationary assets we own. But ultimately, what's happening now is game theory.
Oh, yeah.
So yesterday, the Chinese minister, I can't remember which minister he was, but he was a pretty high up guy, said, we're going to explore also establishing a Bitcoin reserve. And he threw out a number. And again, I'm relying on the interpreter because I don't speak Mandarin, but he threw out a number of a big number, like 1.4 trillion. Now, that was probably renminbi, which would be, closer to 200 billion. But that's a big number. By $200 billion of Bitcoin, that's a big. Now, I read this morning, they are in, or were in, because I guess, they're 13 hours ahead. They were in a closed door meeting today. Now, it's interesting that they did their closed door meeting on Friday, the same as the U.S. That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Coincidence. But they were in a closed door meeting, and I would not be surprised at all if on Sunday night we got an announcement that China has reversed their ban on crypto and they were buying. Now, if that happens, for sure.
We would certainly be on the way up. And I think you're starting to see a lot of alignment from the folks that are in the know. So basically, a lot of the industry leaders that are currently at the summit have been agreeing with you, Mark. So Brian Armstrong basically is advocating for the simplest best solution for Bitcoin as a reserve. Our friend Hunter at Bitwise also said the same. And of course, the head of research for CoinShares, I thought this was a very kind quote. So the idea of having multiple assets in addition to Bitcoin is akin to tech investments, with having little regard for the qualities of the assets and more towards a patriotic stance. There's a lot of subtext in that text. But Garlinghouse probably had the best one, Mark. So the CEO of Ripple, he wasn't self-serving at all when he said, maximalism is the enemy of the industry progress. Glad to see POTUS recognizing we live in a multi-chain world.
Look, and there's nothing wrong with living in a multi-chain world. But I'm sorry, Brad, XRP has nothing to do with the chain. I don't get any revenue from the chain. I don't get any ownership of the chain. Look, you did an ICO. You kept it all for yourself and the foundation, and you sell it to the plebs. That's your business model. And you talk about all this lofty stuff about you want to be the base layer for the Bank of International Settlements, and like, well, but we're trying to replace that. We don't want to help them stay around. We want to replace that, right? Be your own bank, right? Mm-hmm. So Brad is all about Brad, and Brad's become way richer than me. So I probably shouldn't cast aspersions because he's a multi-billionaire. And he actually has the fiat. Like on paper, XRP is worth a lot of money. It's not, right? If he were to sell, or the foundation were to sell any meaningful amount, like if they tried to sell, quote unquote, to the government, the price would collapse.
Right.
Because there's no there. So knock yourself out, talk about, multi-chain. I totally agree in multi-chain world. But when it comes to digital gold, proof of work, only thing that works, not proof of stake, not proof of history, not proof of, or no proof of work, converting energy to value. Look, Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto. So, I've been not getting a lot of sleep because Monster Hunter Wilds came out last week, and I've been playing a lot, and this game is so unbelievable. This company, Capcom, I mean, it's just unbelievable. I mean, everything about it is unbelievable. But in the end, my handle is Got Bitcoin, right? And that's my handle across all my gaming. But you have two things. You have a Palico, a little cat that helps you run around, and then you have a secret that you ride around, and it's like cross between an ostrich and a dinosaur. Long story, my Palico, my helper, is named Satoshi, and my secret, and that's Seikret, that's kind of a cool play on the word secret, name is Nakamoto's Secret. And so look, I'm all in the game, but the point of this is, if you're going to own digital assets of any type, PFPs, title to land, art, anything of value, do you want it on a chain that points to an AWS server that literally AWS could say, nope, you can't have that? Hell to the no. You want it on chain, and you want it on chain guaranteed by thousands of computers that are contributing their resources to secure the network that has never been hacked. I mean, but I don't want to pick on XRP too much, but it's so easy. The first, I can't even remember the number, like 44,000 blocks or something. We don't know where they went. And what do you mean you don't know where they went? You can't have a blockchain that doesn't have a continuous chain, right? That's the whole point. And so Anyway, I digress.
Well, I think, it's one thing to mention about your classic gamer qualities here, Mark, because one small story, which we did not cover, was our friend Elon has had some controversy with his own game. So he was big in Diablo, as was I growing up. And so there was some allegations made that he wasn't actually doing the work to kind of get the character to where he needed to be. And he eventually fessed up to saying, I didn't do it all by myself. And I'll guess if I'm going to fact check this, Mark, for our listeners, I'll say that he's correct. He didn't do the work all by himself. But this is an idea that you can pay somebody to help level up your character, where basically you can help them, a better character can come and clear out all the bad monsters. You can collect some experience along the way. I myself have done this, right? But I did not go on social media and claim that I was the best at this game.
That's unbelievable. That is unbelievable. It's so in character for him. And look, I will admit there was a Pokemon game that my son and I, that's how I kind of went down this rabbit hole, is my son pulled me into Pokemon during lockdowns, and then I discovered Monster Hunter, and I was hooked. But there was a Pokemon game where I could not beat the boss. I mean, my fingers just wouldn't move the way. So I literally gave the game to my son and said, $20. Just beat the monster. And in like 5 seconds, he was done.
The truth comes out.
Ow! But there is, look, I'm old. I mean, my dexterity is not what it once was. And you watch, to your point, you watch some of the good players play these games. It's mind-boggling. I mean, I don't spend a lot of time watching streamers, but in the lead up to this release, I've been watching a couple of there is this one player. I mean, they're the big first boss in Wild is called Arkveld, and it's this pretty cool, called a White Wraith, and took me multiple times. I got carded, I got killed and carted off multiple times, and this guy posts a video, my private gal actually, posts a video of 40 seconds.
Jeez.
And like, what? But then you watch how they move, and it's the other, and just to why tech is such a great place to invest, which is an unbelievable segue, right? Is the ability to push XOO and watch your character do these things and dodge out of the way, and it's incredible what these game developers can do and what people can do with technology. And now we're going to get down into questions about quantum, and China released this new quantum chip. So first it was, who did Willow? Meta or Google?
Google
did Willow.
And then Microsoft invented the new state of matter, right?
Yeah. And then they have the new state of matter, which wasn't a new state, but okay. And then Microsoft. So all of the big companies were like, oh no, we're the kings of quantum. And then quietly, China's like, yeah, our quantum chip's 1,000 times better than that. But, no problem. And look, the stuff that's coming out of China in the past 6 months, technologically, is truly mind-numbing. I mean, whether it's the plasma fusion reactor, whether it's the quantum chip, whether it's DeepSeek, and now, so there was DeepSeek, which was better than all of ours, and then Quen topped that, then Kimi topped that, and then another one topped that. And so there are these tools, but there was another one where he's probably not a child, but he looks 14, and he's standing next to this like miniature quantum computer. Like, the IBM one is gigantic, and it sits in this, minus 470 degree Kelvin bath of liquid nitrogen. And this guy's like got a miniature one that he built in like it's like the quote up from Iron Man. He built it in a cave with spare parts.
But to your point, Mark, I think it's this idea that is fundamentally Chinese, where if there is a state mandate, that is what everybody focuses their attention on. And that's where the advancements are made. And so AI now has really been this mandate to really not just invest and compete in it, but to be the best in this. And so there's numerous of examples here, including the civil service, which has gone AI first with a nationwide deployment. And so this is fully transformed civil service. I mean, can you imagine the U.S. where we complain so much about waste and things like having to create optimizations? So there's some examples here. And what's great, one of my things that I'm also very interested in China about is a small MVP in China is like 100 million people. All right. So that's like his scope of this project.
Yes.
And so that's introduced 70 digital employees, and they're handling tasks like permits, emergency response, and they're doing 90% faster document processing, 80% better cross-department coordination, and 95% accuracy on automated tasks using these AI agents in Shenzhen, which is exactly what you're talking about, Mark. And the only thing that I can remember, I don't want to totally bash the good old US of A, because in my gym, I have one of my favorite quotes under JFK, which says, I'm not going to do the Boston accent because I don't want to make you laugh too hard. I'll say, we choose to go to the moon and do other hard things this decade, not because they're easy, but because they're hard, for some gym motivation. And so when America really puts its effort towards a goal, we can do it. But what we're seeing now in China is exactly what you're saying about not just competing, but being the best at something and doing that within their own borders. It's really amazing.
No, it's amazing. And to your point, we can definitely do it. And we still have the best university system. We do. We have the best research. We have the best companies. Not every single company, but we have some of the best companies, maybe some of the best companies, not all the best companies, but we have some of the best companies. We have great entrepreneurs. We have but what we've lacked since probably Kennedy is leadership that kind of gets it. And I'll give you a great example. So years ago, Singapore, which was trying to develop into this great place, the Switzerland of the East, said, you know what? We're going to have this great social welfare system for our people, and we're going to provide it to everybody, but we're not just going to take the current employees' money and give it to the old people. We're going to take some money, and we're going to invest it. So they created the GIC, the government of Singapore, and Temasek, and they have invested with all the great venture capitalists and all the great growth equity firms and they make direct investments. So they are massively overfunded, right, for all these things that they're going to promise their people. And you can go there and pay zero taxes. Think about that, zero taxes. I mean, it's incredible. And it's a beautiful place. I was just there.
Yeah.
So long story, for years, I've been saying we need to do the same thing, right? Right. We need to create a venture capital fund where the government owns a piece of all of these great companies that we're building and developing instead of a pay-as-you-go system, which is how it works now. And there just aren't enough workers for the number of retirees. So now, 3 days ago, China announces they called it a carrier class initiative, which I loved, right? Carrier class initiative, $1 trillion renminbi, $136 billion venture capital fund, a government-sponsored venture capital fund to side-by-side invest with Sequoia, China, which is now renamed to a Chinese name that I can't pronounce because they spun out of Sequoia, and all these other great firms that, they convened a tech summit a few weeks ago with all these great leaders, and they basically then made this big announcement on Wednesday. We could do that. Right? We could absolutely create the equivalent. And we kind of did it during the global financial crisis. Kind of. Right? We didn't bail out GM. We took equity in the reorg.
Right. We invested. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be hand out to the people that pay money, for unions or whatever. It should be, you got troubles? Sure. We can help you. We can print some money and we can buy a piece of your business. Now, the printing money part is a problem because that creates inflation, but we have all of these amazing assets in this country that we could liquefy. And we wouldn't even have to sell them. We could just rent them, right? Imagine if, like, hunters will pay a lot of money to rent land. We have a lot of land, right? You could probably, make some money.
Federal government owns about half of the land in the United States, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so there's lots of things that you could do. But let's take the money and, like, I would happily, this is a crazy statement, taxes and happy. I would happily pay a little bit of my taxes into that fund. Happily, I would do that. But and hopefully that will come out of this type of meeting that's going on today. Not just, hey, let's buy an asset and hope it goes up, which that's not a bad strategy if you buy the right asset. But let's invest in new technology and let's take advantage of the great schools, the great research, the great companies, the great leadership that we have. It could be awesome. I mean, it could be truly, truly awesome.
Agreed. And a point, Mark, that you probably don't have a ton of time to get into, but one that has been on my mind for a while. When we talk about the battle between the U.S. and China, a lot of that is for sort of the influence globally of, obviously let's just keep it simple about purchasing power. What is going to be the dominant currency? I'll speak about other things other times. But the idea here is that, will it be the dollar? Will it be the renminbi? But now, Mark, could it and will it be Bitcoin? And in the investment from the U.S., is that a hedge against its own potential decline? And I'll point to one other thing. So in Mexico, Ricardo Salinas, who is the head of Banco Azteca, 70% of his personal portfolio, of his telecom portfolio, holds Bitcoin. And he has publicly announced that Banco Azteca will be the first bank in Mexico to accept BTC. We know why. There's a lot of national security reasons why that would make sense for some place like Mexico, especially now in a tariff-laden world. We've now seen the U.S. go in, all in. Now with this declaration, we are going to expect many other countries to make such stages. So this is an interesting point.
That is the best point maybe that we've ever had on the show. I mean, that insight you just shared. No, I'm serious. That is maybe the best insight that we could have ever shared, because that leap from look, people are going to buy because the number go up, right? Whatever.
Right.
No. Think about it. The dollar, the hegemonic world reserve currency,
right,
since 1941 1944. Sorry, 1944 has been a weapon, and it's been weaponized against anyone that pisses us off, right? Whether it's Gaddafi or whether it's Iraq or whether it's Iran or Mexico. And so if you're thinking about it, they're like, oh, geez, how could I defend myself against that?
Right.
I could own an asset that isn't reliant on the dollar. Like when we talk about currencies, whether it's the Mexican peso or the Venezuelan bolivar or the Japanese yen, we're not talking about it in isolation. We're talking it relative to USD, right? JPY USD or, BRL USD. That relationship gives the hegemonic world reserve currency massive power. And so if you're a country saying, well, what if I didn't denominate in that thing and I denominated in this other thing that's technologically superior because it's scarce? That's interesting. And it de-weaponizes, and that's not even a word, but I just made it up a word. It de-weaponizes the dollar, and that's going to happen. And so now the game theory starts to accelerate. And at the end of the day, people say, well, there's only 21 million Bitcoin. There's not enough. No. 2.1 quadrillion. There are 2.1 quadrillion Satoshis, right? 100 million Satoshis per Bitcoin. And eventually we'll talk in Satoshis. We won't talk about Bitcoin. Bitcoin will be the unit, but we'll talk about individual Satoshis. There's plenty of Satoshis for everyone in the world. It's just the value of those Satoshis in whatever fiat you happen to play in will change. Now, ultimately, the real insight of your comment is, well, what if we eventually get to everything's just Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is the global currency, the world, borderless, nation stateless currency. Whew, well, that's interesting, because then governments can't really control each other or sanction each other. Well, then we don't really need war, because we're all kind of in the same collective.
And that's the big point, Mark. I think that's really the critical point is, in the end of the day, if people are more interconnected and dependent on each other, they'll treat each other better. When a person who is separated from society, the mountain man is a very dangerous man. Ted Kaczynski was very dangerous for a long time because he had no connection to the world. People who are more dependent upon their neighbor tend to treat their neighbor a little bit better. And so if you can kind of create an economic motivation for this, well, then heck, you can potentially improve a system, at least from a motivation standpoint, because people are still irrational actors. You have to assume rationality, which is, one of the first, constraints of building any economic model. But Mark, I think
everything you say is so perfectly logical. The problem is there's an impediment.
Mm-hmm.
And that impediment is the entrenched hierarchy, right?
Yeah.
People in the all-seeing eye, that they kind of like the current system because they get super rich.
Fair point.
The average person around the world, not so much, but the people in that, top of the pyramid, they like this system and they are not really excited to give it up. So that system goes away in a world that you describe. I would like that personally. And also I feel blessed every day when I wake up, right? That we live in a country, we don't have to worry about Scud missiles flying over our head. There are plenty of people around the world that is a reality of, and part of that reality, part of it is this issue of non-interdependence. Now there's religious and political and all kinds of other differences that cause some of the strife. But at the end of the day, if you are, like you say, if you're dependent on your neighbor,
yeah,
you'll be nicer to them, and vice versa. Now, will there always be bad people?
No doubt.
Yeah, no doubt.
There'll always be rogue agents. Yeah.
Always be rogue agents. And there will always be people who, like even in the original 13, right? There was a traitor. So there will always be some.
Yeah. I think, Mark, it's a good segue we can put into for the chart of the week. Why settle for a regular candle when you can have a hammer candle, right? And that is where you've got the lower and the upper part of the week of 90% of the total range. So basically big swings, right? And that's what we have been seeing lately. So I will share my screen. And while I do that, I'll always remind the listeners that are on audio only, check us out on YouTube. That's where a lot of the fun stuff happens, where we have the Bitcoin sock reveal. We see if we're matching today. We are. I'm going to count it due to Mark's 720 camera, my 1080 camera. They look black, the maybes and black match. So Mark, let me know if you see the screen.
I got.
Let me see if I can increase the size of this. So what we're seeing here, for those that are on audio only, is that hammer candle, or basically something that we in the business use to see price activity in action. And, without revealing too much of our cards, Mark, in IC, we talk about this kind of stuff. And this helps us make decisions about, should we be looking to buy? Should we be looking to sell? Should we look to do nothing? And so when you see something like this, Mark, maybe let some of the listeners know the man behind the decisions at the IC table. So when you're coming on the Monday morning, Monday afternoon, and some of this data comes out, maybe explain what you find significant here, because this is showing kind of very recent movement as of January through today.
Yeah, look, there are, technical analysis, the analysis of market participants has these things called candles, and candles have to do with the opening price, the high price, the low price, and the closing price. So open, high, low, close. And it draws out a candle. So let's say you open low and you close high, you'd have a positive candle. And it would be green or black, I guess, or black and white. Just depends on your system. Green, yeah, let's call it green. Go call it green and red. Well, if you open high and close low, you'd have a red candle. Well, what if you open in the middle and they call it wicking up or wicking down, and then you settle right back in the middle? Well, then you'd have a thing that looks like kind of a star. And long story short, when there's a lot of variability during the day, all right, so there's a lot of, people aren't sure, is it going up, is it going down? But then you settle at one end, the bottom, that makes literally looks like a hammer. So you've got this thing on the bottom with this long handle, or it settles on the top, you've got a hammer. And a hammer at the top can, again, hammer you down. A hammer on the bottom can say, "Woo, now is the time to get in." And there are other things like, quote unquote, the shooting star. Like when you get to a place where everybody believes one thing and there's no variability. So there's just, you're right at that price and you open, high, low, close is all about the same. That's usually either the peak or the trough. So those shooting stars. So there are all these things that people look at. But hammers are very, very important because it's not voodoo and it's not conjecture. It's just data. And data, markets are made up by market participants. And market participants have actions. They buy or they sell or they hold or they buy option. I mean, there's all this activity. And when you get these very clear signals, and I'm a visual guy. I love visuals. I think in pictures. I learn in pictures. I love pictures. And so this to me is very helpful and very accurate long term of what you want. And there are other ones like, one of my favorites is, the what do they call it? Not three rising soldiers, but anyway, three white soldiers. That was it. Three white soldiers. And it's basically, or it could be green. So it's basically 3 up candles in a row. When you get 3 in a row, you're probably going to get a 4th one. And then you got 3 black crows, right? When you get 3 down in a row, you're probably going to go down. And so there are all of these things that it's not voodoo. You're just saying, well, if everyone's buying, they're probably going to keep buying. So the trend is your friend until it turns. And then you get that shooting star or hammer to give you a sense of where we're going. So
no, well said, Mark, because to even put that point into greater focus, the idea of, what this signals, we've only seen this mark 5 times in history where that 90%, that huge mark, and those are coming in the 2017 bull run, late 2021 bull run, twice in 2023 following the banking crisis. We saw what was going on during the turnaround, and of course 2024. So, this to me signals something that is, number one, a rare event. I think as data nerds as we are, we just think this stuff is cool because you just don't see it that often. But then, of course, when you add in, all the stuff we were talking about over the last 60 minutes about what is going on and what could be happening over the next 6 to 9 months or 12 months, you really are kind of seeing that reflect itself in the data, contemporaneously. And so, we shall see, what that will mean come Sunday night. I think, we want to leave our viewers on a cliffhanger. This is one of those times where you sell the news, buy the rumors, but also read the data, right?
Read the data. And that's the perfect place to end this week. So again, thanks for shepherding us through another week.
No worries. We'll always remind our listeners to rate, review, subscribe, give us 5 stars, and as always, stay current.
Thank you for joining us this week on Digital Currents. Check out our links to our website and social media in the show's description box. Please make sure to subscribe if you like what you hear. And remember, stay current.
This podcast should not be construed as investment advice nor solicitation for the sale of any security, advisory, or other service. Investment themes and ideas discussed may be owned by funds managed by the host and podcast guests. Any conflicts at the time of production have been mentioned by the host but are subject to change. Listeners should consult their personal financial advisors before making any investment decisions.